Hello and welcome to the AskWeldon Show, episode 135. Today we are going to talk about getting more aggressive, it can be trained, one-trick ponies, and roster changes. I'm going to leave that ominous until I get to the question, and then you'll see exactly what I mean. But just for those of you who are clickbaited here by that, sorry, it's not probably what you're expecting, but I hope that it's interesting anyway, even though it's not technically about real drama-filled, news-ready roster changes or any sort of analysis of them in any way. But yeah, as always, this is a show about esports psychology training, and high performance. I am a sports psychology trainer that transitioned to esport, and I coach League of Legends teams mainly, although a couple CSGOs smattered in there at the professional level, anywhere from the coach role to the kind of like counseling role on the side. I am not a clinical therapist, so every question I get about that, I kind of deflect towards that field of clinical inquiry. But I do focus a lot on high performance and elite performance and the mindset and the training involved in getting to that point. So you can ask questions for the show by using the app Anchor right now, at least. This changes, when I find new and better ways to do it. But right now, there's an app called Anchor. You go to anchor.fm/Weldon Green. You can see it right here. Download it for Apple and Android, and then you can, I believe, maybe there's not an Android app. I think there's an Android app. I hope there's an Android app. Anyway, go to my channel, favorite it, and then call in. You just raise the phone to your ear and talk, just as you saw in that little picture there, and you produce this beautiful version of your voice that is very, well edited and shows up on my channel, and I can play it for the stream or for the show here, and they can hear the question, and then I answer it. So, without further adu, let's jump into the first question, which, by the way, I'm sorry to say, actually comes through Twitter. So you can follow me on the hashtag on Twitter. You could follow me on my account on Twitter, MindGamesWeldon, but use the hashtag AskWeldon for questions, especially during the next week, because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get them from my phone onto this show very easily since I'm traveling, and so I'll be relying a lot more on the Twitter questions. If you want to get on the show, it's a good way to get your question kind of in there on Twitter next week, Monday through Thursday. Okay, so the first question, and unfortunately I have to read it, comes from Deactivated691, and he asks, how do I become more aggressive? I feel like my mechanical skill and knowledge of matchups push me into playing a lot more reserved in Overwatch. Okay, so this is a good question because aggression is usually related in sport to really high ego and success, both of which are correlated with winning. And aggression forces other people to make mistakes and pushes you to the limits of your ability, which forces you to continuously develop through failure at the edges of aggression. So I personally am a big fan of aggression, as are researchers who look at increased levels of aggression as a positive trend in their interventions usually. And so, for example, one of the really powerful findings that is currently standing about, excuse me, I'm not going to edit that out either because I don't do post edits now that I'm producing the show live. It's just going to sit there and make me look like a tired person who has 4 kids and didn't get very much sleep. 3 kids and a baby in a pregnant tummy. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, one of the more interesting findings that is standing about mindfulness research and mindfulness acceptance commitment research is that there was a test on a women's volleyball team and it improved aggression by over 30%, which is a large number when you compare it to traditional psychological skills training. So a lot of promise there in that technique. Okay, so how do you become more aggressive? So aggression is essentially limited by fear. So the first thing you have to do is see what is limiting you, Deactivated 691. Is it your fear or your ego? Do you not believe that you are good enough, and so you don't make the move, you don't play aggressive? Or are you afraid of the consequences of making a mistake? Both of those things can be the case. And if you lack ego, then you should really work on essentially your braggadocio. You should work on telling yourself this positive talk kind of thing in the mirror every day, like, I'm the best. Oh, yeah. I'm the best. Oh, yeah. where you're like hyping yourself up and you're like, okay, I might lose to this guy today and he might be better than me right now, but he's not going to be better than me tomorrow or the next day. Like, I am the greatest and I will be the greatest and I am the best that ever lived, that kind of thing. High ego is what is needed to reach elite levels of play. You need to be slightly perfectionistic and have a really high kind of approach to yourself or self-confidence. It doesn't have to be this braggadocio ego I'm talking about. It can be just like a thorough, saturated confidence in who you are and what you want. That can exist too. But one of those two things, either really good kind of ego pushing in that, or some sort of dysfunctional perfectionism or something where you have to pursue this justification of high performance in order to identify who you are, is more or less needed for this kind of pursuit. So I would say work on just accepting that and trying to be that, and consequences be darned. And don't, of course, bring that into your traditional life, like your real life. Like you should always be humble and kind. But then when you have this sporting persona of who you are and in your craft, you should push that to the limits of what your ego allows you to do. Second thing is your fears. Okay, now this is more practical because obviously there's a program for it. You can train to experience your fears and not avoid them, but to essentially ignore them. So mindfulness being kind of like realizing what emotions are running through you and that it's anxiety. Acceptance being to like roll with that anxiety, to instead of try to fight it off, avoid it, keep it from happening, come up with hacks to get away from it, trying to push it away when it shows up, or use coping mechanisms such as not taking the risk when it comes up. You want to accept it and be like the surfer who's just riding the big wave. And the commitment being that you're afraid, but you play aggressive anyway. So then, although you aren't aggressive internally, you are acting aggressive externally, which is the thing that actually matters, because that's the real world, not what you're trying to do in your head. So that's the really simple answer to your question, and I hope it was useful. I really triggered myself with that first yawn. It like called the rest of my brain and was like, hey, he's in yawn mode, guys. Go for it. All right, next question is from Anchor. Let's jump in.
Hi there, Weldon. So my question is related to League of Legends. I recently hit a wall with the champion I currently play in solo queue, which is Diana. And I'm pretty sure she's quite the viable pick. And I enjoy playing her a lot. I just wondered if changing to a different, more efficient or easy champion is the right thing to do towards climbing, even though that would make me lose the fun factor I have playing Diana. Thanks for listening in and answering the question. I really appreciate what you're doing.
All right, Sammy, thank you for the question. So to answer it, no, it depends on your goals. Okay, first of all, it depends on your goals. If you want to climb and you want to be recruited by a pro team and you want to get better at the game in general, you should kind of play the meta champs. You should master one or two of them, and you should be able to do fun things like counter picks so you can stomp your lane better. And you should try to participate in the meta. But if your goal is to have fun and to one-trick pony and climb, then you should just play Diana. I mean, I'm a massive fan of one-trick ponying a champ until you're literally so sick of it that you can't queue up with it again. I think I played Talon like as many games as I had games at one point. So I doubled my amount of games, and half of them were with Talon. So essentially, no, you can get to one-trick. You can get to really, really top level by one-trick ponying something, and you really only need to adapt that when you have the goal to learn laning a little differently. So you'll learn the map and you'll learn how to macro just fine, and you'll learn really deep depths of strategy in the game about your champion by one-trick ponying, and that's all a good thing, actually. I think that people narrowing their champ pool is something that needs to happen more and more if they want to actually work on these other like soft skills in the game. However, if you do want to focus on your lane and you want to be a lane like god, then you need to know how every champion interacts with every champion. You need to know how do I play with a mid-range spellcaster? How should I play with like an assassin, like something like LeBlanc when she's OP, or something like a long range, spellcaster. So those kind of questions can only really be answered at a high level by beating them into your body. And so it's best to just kind of like take what's in the meta, take what's strongest, and learn why it's strong and how to win trades with it and see what that feels like. So yeah, my recommendation would be, if you're not going to have fun and you don't have any goals there or aspirations, then stick with what you love and use it to get to depths of the game that are entertaining to you. Thank you for the question. All right, we're burning through this. We have one more question left. Short show today because I got to run, so really short recording. Remember that if you have a question that did not get answered, you can always hit me up on Snapchat, MindGamesWeldon. When I'm at the gym, I try to answer questions there. If for example, I can answer questions there, a lot of times I'm too focused or my phone has too low battery recently because my kid keeps unplugging at night. So I walk into the gym with 8% and I can't Snapchat for 2 hours because I need my freaking fitness tracking app. But anyway, enough complaining. Make sure to check that out. That's where I put my story. Of course, it's also on Instagram, which is the same exact handle. I don't reply to my DMs in Instagram as much as I do in Snapchat, and I don't reply as in depth because it's more text and less like click the button and say what I want. But to each their own. That's where I replicate my story just as well. So, okay, last question. Let's jump in.
Hey Weldon, my name is Trevor, and I am an amateur coach in Overwatch, an upper level amateur coach. And something that we deal with pretty often is players getting recruited into the pro scene, whether through Overwatch League or contenders. And something that I'm doing right now is trying to develop a lot of systems to help us mitigate the stress of that. Something that I've done recently is done a pair review exercise. Instead of doing a full team VOD review session, I will, split them up into twos, 2, 2, and 2, because there's 6 on a roster, so that they can talk about the game together and kind of snowball that collaboration between similar pairs. I was wondering if you had any other exercises or ideas to help mitigate the stress of frequent roster changes on a core team. Thanks, man. Bye.
Okay, fantastic question. I do have some suggestions, Trevor. So here they are. First of all, one of my favorite tools to use is player dates, which essentially means that you send the players off with each other and you force them to... You send them off with a set of questions. So I create player dates essentially around different themes. Okay, we're going to talk about this strategy. We're going to talk about our team's philosophy about this. Or we're going to talk about why this champion is OP or why not. Or we're going to talk about why we lost this match. And here's 2 questions that have nothing to do with Overwatch and have to do with you as a human and your teammate as a human. And those are the first ones you have to answer. And you have to answer them in depth. So now you go off to lunch. They answer those 2 questions, and then after that, they discuss the topic, whatever topic you kind of set them to, and then they should have a takeaway. So they should have something that they can share with the team when they get back in terms of that is a coalesced version of their opinion about what they talked about. And it should last no more than like 30 to 45 seconds to share it, or it can be graphical if they really want to get artsy and craftsy. But this is done over lunch, hopefully, for like 45 minutes to an hour, if you include the Uber at some, joint. So that's the first thing, player dates, and I try to rotate them around to the players. So pretty similar to what you're doing for VOD review, except you just expand that to everything else and put it over meals. The second thing is team codes. You should really work with the team to establish like what is it that we train for, what is it that we perform for, what do we believe in, and what are the codes of behavior for this team. How is it that we act? Don't try to set ones that are like aspirational. Look at how the team acts. Take the best elements of that cause you to win the most and put them and herald them in terms of an actual physical document that like exists somewhere in real space, not on the computer, on a wall somewhere. And the final one is an orientation book in Trello. I saw this recently. I've been wanting to try it. I have not tried it yet, but I'm going to suggest it because if you go to Trello and you look for like onboarding or onboarding via Trello, you will find a ton of well-structured Trello boards that show how to build a set of resources you can use for onboarding. And I think that something like as simple as an onboarding Trello, with a collection of information about, for example, social media behavior, kind of house rules, previous amazing games, what the typical like setup in the house is, chore lists, whatever are going on. You can use Trello Trello to pretty much engineer any kind of onboarding, up to and including like one-on-one booked sessions with the coach to get to know them better, to video trainings, etc. So I think like building an ever-expanding, ever-growing kind of like always updated orientation book in Trello that taps in also to your front office, your marketing team, so that they can provide assets. There'll be a card for their stream setup and everything. Can really make the process, feel like they're coming onto a team. And it can include a little bit of like reading the bios of their teammates, and you can make sure that those are kind of accurate and a little bit more in-depth than the public ones, so that there's a little bit of a story behind them, or even some psychological elements, like this person says that this is their biggest fear, this is their biggest struggle on stage, this is their biggest hope in their teammates, these are their kind of long-term goals in the team. And you've done that activity as a group. You don't want to do it again as a group when you get a new roster change, right? You don't want to have to do team goals, share your goals, and then somebody changes roster. Okay, team goals again, share your goals, and the other 3 people are like, because they just did this literally like 4 weeks ago. So coalesce them into the bios of the people that are doing them. Like put them, in a nice, well-structured format into a bio sheet that is internal only, and that your teammate reads when they come on through the onboarding panel, so that they kind of see what's going on. Have them fill one out on their own and share it with their teammates. So those are my suggestions for 3 simple ways that you can kind of increase team building after a roster change. And I think it's really important. And I think that reset phase is really important. That honeymoon phase of a new person is a really good chance to install new behaviors. So you can also have discussions that are things like, what were bad habits in the previous version of this team that you don't want to continue? What are good habits that you feel like you do want to continue? And that gives the new people a little bit of a mission, kind of an understanding of what came before and why they were replaced in a practical sense, and kind of how to be better. So that is my answer. I hope it was helpful. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I already talked about my Mac program, so you kind of know that that's out there. That is how I support myself and my channel. Obviously, I sell consulting, and I sell services to a company in Berlin as a way to kind of earn a living, but I would like to move more towards being supported by the Mac program, so make sure to check that out. If you have any inkling toward mastering your performance, mastering your emotions, or finding a way to build through esport transferable competitive skills and transferable life skills that you can bring into other elements of your life. This is something that works with any competition, whether it's dancing or test taking or extreme sports, or these other things that don't really kind of like seem to be high performance competition at the outset, such as public speaking, sex even. So yeah, all of these things are performance. All of them are impacted by your ability as a performer, and all of those can be worked on through a program such as MAC, the Mindfulness Acceptance Commitment Program, which, since I'm talking about it, I should throw this up here so that you can find the URL. And that's all I have for you today. Make sure to meditate.